Hello, Tungsten Miner here. This is to be the first in a new Let's Play series about my new mod pack called Quiet Countryside. And of course, the whole idea with a quiet countryside is that you're not constantly getting harassed by mobs all the time. The folks that I play with, we generally like to build things and not so much go around and getting chased by mobs. So I've started with a mod called No Mobs on Trees, which actually is really badly misnamed because what it allows you to do is take really, really fine control over the spawning of mobs. You modify the config file and you can do basically anything at all that you want, mod by mob. And what I've done is make it so that mobs don't spawn on the surface at all, ever, no matter what the light conditions are. They only spawn in caves, and they only spawn in dungeons. So, quiet countryside. In order to go along with that, I've decided to use alternate terrain generation in order to make much more realistic terrain, and we can see nice long beaches, big oceans. I'm kind of on a little peninsula here. Nice mountains and rolling hills. This is actually Minecraft 1.10.2 that I'm using for this mod pack, and ATG is still under development. So this is an alpha version, which sadly means it doesn't have any support for third-party biomes yet. But with Minecraft in 1.10 having so many, it's dozens and dozens, actually that's worked out pretty well. You can hear these crows going. That's from the next mod that I included called Dynamic Surroundings. It adds a ton of sound effects and particle effects all over the world so that everything feels a lot more involved and realistic. I can go down to the beach here and I'll hear seagulls and seabirds and waves crashing on the sand. I can see my footprints behind me. That's a hawk, it sounds like, shrieking in the distance. So lots and lots of realism and depth. Next, as far as extra realism in the gameplay, you can see in my HUD that I've got a little globe that's kind of barely orange. That's from a mod called Tough as Nails, and it adds 3 different dynamics to the game. First is temperature. So you can see I had a little arrow shoot up and my bubble got just a little bit more orange because I'm standing next to a pool of lava, which is making me hotter. And you can get hot enough where you start to get heat stroke and actually take damage and eventually even die from exposure to the elements. And of course, it goes the other direction too, that you can get too cold and you can freeze to death. And of course, the mod adds various items that allows you to cope with these new surroundings. To go along with that, it adds a thirst mechanic, so you can see the little water droplets are how thirsty I am. Right now, I've just had a big drink, so I'm not too thirsty. But just like hunger, your thirst is going to dwindle over time, and eventually you'll start taking damage, although you can't actually die of thirst. You'll get down to 1/2 heart left, but it won't take that last one. And then finally, there's a mechanic that I decided not to use in this mod pack, but I'll mention it anyway, which is you can start off with fewer hearts, and then there's an item that you can find in the nether that will give you those hearts back again up to your normal amount. Okay, so that's the extra realism bits from a gameplay perspective, but I've also included CofhCore, which allows you to do ore generation and custom ore generation. So without getting into a lot of details, maybe I'll talk about that in a future video. I now have ores set up so they don't spawn evenly everywhere. They'll spawn in big veins with just tiny traces using Railcraft's poor ores in order to indicate that a vein could be found in this area. I'm also using a mod, Spice of Life, which makes it so that you can't just eat the same thing over and over again. It'll cure fewer and fewer hunger points each time. And I'm using a mod called Tomb Many Graves. Tomb is in tombstone, many graves. And it's just another one of these mods that makes it so that you get a little grave marker when you die. It's nicer than most of them, though, because of the way it handles that interaction. And maybe I'll talk about that in detail later. I've also got a mod called Earthworks in here, which adds all sorts of medieval sort of medieval technology level materials, so lath and plaster and the kind of medieval looking buildings with the beams and timbers going through them, thatched roofs, stuff like that. I've also got underground biomes constructs. So you can see this is a green schist cobblestone rather than regular cobblestone. I've also got, yeah, that's about it for that kind of stuff. I've also got a mod in here called Chisels and Bits. So you can see here, these teeny little bushes are actually something I built one little 16th of a block at a time. So basically every single little 16th nub you can put in one by one. And then it gives you all sorts of great tools for copying something. So I made this bush and then copied this one from it. For carving off bigger chunks, so I carved off that whole line kind of all at once. And that allows you to make all sorts of shapes that are not normally available in Minecraft without having to actually have a round structure, right? This is actually just still square, just the squares are so much tinier. So you can make things on a 1/16th scale. And in fact, there's a way to use it to make a copy of an entire region in a miniature scale. So I can make a tiny version of this whole house. As far as flora and fauna is concerned, I have a mod installed called Animania, which I think you could see some of the horses and cows. Yeah, there we go. There's one of the Animania cows over there. So all of the cows and chickens and pigs now come in like a half a dozen different varieties each. And in male and female genders. So you have to find one of each if you want to breed your new cows or pigs or whatever. And each of them has different characteristics. Some of them are bigger and stronger. Some of them, the bulls especially, will fight back if you attack them. Some of them produce milk more readily. Some of them produce meat more readily. Some of them produce, whatever other products. Certain hens are better at laying eggs. Roosters, of course, don't lay eggs. So all sorts of great stuff in Animania. I've also included a mod called Minecraft Comes Alive. Let me take a trip to the nearest village while I tell you about it. Basically what this does is it takes out all of the vanilla villagers and replaces them with much more realistic looking characters. In fact, they look a lot like they could be just other players. Oh, here's some more. These look like more Frisian cows. Oh, here's one of our other types of chickens. So here's the nearest village. Lots more cows. Oh, there's a spotted pig. And here's our first encounter with a villager. Obviously, this is a female villager, Vicky the librarian. They'll talk to you. You can interact with them, shake hands. And that apparently was pleasing, so she liked that. I can then maybe chat with her a bit. She liked that too. And eventually, they'll start getting these hearts above them, and you can get to be better and better friends. And in fact, the villagers can marry amongst themselves, and you can even marry the villagers. And, reproduce and have children and all that sort of thing in a very Minecrafty PG sort of way. Where'd my horse get to? There he is. Yeah, so villagers, much, much more interesting. Of course, you can still trade with them as you used to do, but you can also have them use special abilities. So the librarian, for example, knows how happy everybody is in the village. You can have them follow you or stay here. You can change their home so that when it gets dark, they're going to go back to a specific place, not just to the nearest building. And you can, have them ride a horse and go with you. You can give them jobs. Some of them are farmers, and they'll farm crops for you if you pay them. So tons and tons of interesting new interactions with your villagers. As far as the flora of the world is concerned, unfortunately, the version of advanced terrain generation I'm using is an alpha version and doesn't support third-party biomes. But I do have Pam's Harvestcraft and Agricraft both installed. So you can see over here some fruit trees from Harvestcraft. And I haven't yet set up Agricraft, but that's what you might expect to see here. Here's another good example of the Chisels and Bits mods. So I've got these nice round posts with wooden ties going in between them. Not at all a fence that you could produce on your own with vanilla Minecraft or virtually any other mod. So an amazing amount of flexibility with what you can do there. I also have a mod called Cooking for Blockheads, which adds a bunch of blocks to make the management of recipes from Harvestcraft a little bit easier, because there's just so many now. And I also have Mine Factory Reloaded, which allows you to have a lot of automated farming machines. Speaking of technology, the technology progression is intended to have one mod that kind of covers each general area, so there's not a lot of duplication. So starting at the kind of most basic, there's Tinker's Construct for making tools and such, for doing smelting and so on. In this little turf hut that I made for our kind of spawn point in the server, you can see I've got some of the Tinker's Construct stuff, which has come an interesting way in this new version, in that they now work as multi-blocks, so that you can cycle between them once you've got any one of them selected, which is actually really kind of useful. I've also got Immersive Engineering and Immersive Petroleum. So Immersive Engineering is a kind of, let's say, like 1800s-ish oriented tech mod. You've got very basic electricity from a couple of different sources, your diesel engine being the most complicated. And then to go along with that, but all of the stuff in that mod is intended to be super, super realistic, which means, of course, a diesel engine is not, at least from that period, a simple device, and it is enormous. It's a 3x5x3 multi-block structure that's very expensive to make, but kicks out quite a lot of power. And there's even bigger ones, and it's just fabulous. I love that mod. To go along with that, I've found a mod called Immersive Petroleum, which adds a lot of more multi-block things for drilling for oil. And it works in very much the same way as the Immersive Engineering excavator, in that the oil doesn't have to literally be present as blocks in the world. It'll find a deposit and produce it for you. In game terms, what's going on is you're exchanging an incredible amount of power for the item, which is getting drilled up from the ground theoretically, even though you couldn't find any blocks that represent that. Next, I've got Thermal Expansion, which adds a lot of basic ore processing and plant processing and material generation, and it's a huge mod. I'd recommend you check out my mod spotlight on thermal expansion and thermal dynamics if you want to get deeper into that, because it took me like 2.5 hours to go through all the things that it can do. Next up, I've got RF Tools and RF Dimensions, which adds basically even more sophisticated and complicated tools, including more power generation and stuff like that. RF Tools Dimensions adds the ability to teleport yourself to dimensions and even specify what they look like. I'm just going to take a little tour on my horse here so you get a sense of the terrain generation while I talk about the rest of the mods. So yeah, it requires a lot of power potentially, but you can make some very custom ordered dimensions that have some very interesting characteristics. So for example, there's all the stone is replaced by diamond ore. That would be very expensive, very expensive dimension to create. But hey, diamond ore everywhere for every single block. That would be pretty awesome. Yeah, what else? I've also got extreme reactors, which you might remember as big reactors, but the new version for 1.10 has changed the name. Whoa, nearly ran right into that. So that's basically unchanged, although it looks like they're planning to do a lot of interesting stuff. So I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye on future development there. And then finally, I have open computers. Again, trying to stick with the realism aspect of things. ComputerCraft is fantastic, great mod, but the recipes are really, really early game recipes, and they don't really require any power. So it's a little too easy. So Open Computers takes a little bit more and gives you a lot of the same kind of stuff. Supplementing that, I've also got storage drawers and refined storage. Refined storage is very similar to Oh, what's it called? Anyway, moving on. As far as transportation, getting around in the world, you can see we've got these really immense landscapes that alternate terrain generation adds. So getting around is now kind of a problem. If I was on foot, this would take forever. So obviously we've still got horses from vanilla Minecraft. We've also got these draft horses that Animania adds, which are a bit beefier. Unfortunately, they don't really do much of anything yet, but the mod author says eventually he wants to add a cart, which you'll then be able to harness to these horses, and then haul around a lot of stuff, a lot more stuff than you could carry on a horse, on a vanilla horse, that is. I've also got Railcraft, which adds a lot of awesome railroading type stuff and signals and switches and different sorts of tracks and high-speed rails, and it's an immense mod and has a huge amount of very real-world oriented railroading sort of stuff. To go along with that, I've also added Steve's Carts, which adds a lot of automation through railroading, so a lot of basically robotic carts. I've also got a mod called Rope Bridge and another one called Literal Ascension. Between the two of them, they add a bunch of ladders and ropes and rope ladders and grappling hooks and all sorts of ways of climbing up and down big places. So as you can see, I'm way up at the top of a hill here, and across this valley, you can see some pretty steep cliff faces, which is not an uncommon feature with an ATG sort of world. So yeah, very handy to have that kind of thing around. I've also got a mod called Underwater Utilities, which adds some basic scuba equipment. Nothing elaborate, not a whole lot of blocks, but it's exactly what you want for this mod. It's very focused and it's very thoughtfully done. So you've got a machine that you can run with RF power to compress air into a tank and then strap it on your back and go diving underwater. So here we've wound up at one of the other players' very crude first houses. I imagine she'll get more involved as the game goes on. I've also got a mod called the Sleeping Bag mod, which I will use now, which adds this one single item. Very similar to the sleeping bag you might remember from other mods, but I didn't want all the other stuff in any of those mods, and this mod has just the sleeping bag, which is precisely all I wanted. Going along with transportation ideas here, I've also got a mod called Harvestcraft, which adds airships. So basically they work just like the 1.10 boats, except they can fly. And in order to do that, you need to provide them with fuel, and making them is complicated, so it's not an early game item. You have to have at least made it to the Nether in order to make one of these things. But they look really, really super cool. And they come in a lot of different materials. And the better the materials you use, the faster the ships go, and the higher they can fly, which I thought was particularly fascinating with advanced terrain generation. Now, I'm at Y level 92, and as you can see, I'm not especially high. You know, there's mountains all around me that are taller than where I am now. So if you have an airship that can only go up to level 90, you couldn't even take it to get up to this plane where I am right now. Let's see. I've also got Da Vinci's vessels, which you may remember as Archimedes ships. But basically what that adds is a single block that allows you to basically grab a structure that's attached to that block and then be able to move it around. So it's kind of like building a house, well, a boat really, and then moving it about in the real world. It's kind of hard to believe, but yeah, when you try it out, it's really, really awesome. It allows you to make much larger ships and to make them exactly as you see fit. So unlike, say, Harvestcraft, where the boats, the airships are very specific. They work exactly the way they work, and they are exactly what they are, and there aren't any options about what they look like apart from the material you choose. You can make a Da Vinci's Vessels boat any shape, include whatever blocks you like. The only limit is that you have to stay under 2,048 blocks. And apart from that, it's kind of up to you to decide how you want to make it, what shape, and it'll just grab all the blocks and move them. Very, very cool mod. Let's see what else. I think that's it for transportation. So general equipment. I've got Redstone Arsenal, which adds is kind of a supplement to thermal expansion, and adds equipment that goes along with that. Which instead of degrading in its durability, it loses power, and then it just doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It works basically at a minimal level when it's not powered up. Spartan Shields adds a bunch of shields, very cool shields. The more exotic and expensive the material, generally the more powerful and durable the shield. I've got a mod called Modular Power Suits. Machine uses modular power suits. It adds Iron Man armor to the game. Short, very simply, that's what it does. And you can configure the armor to have all sorts of different capabilities. So the basic shell of the armor doesn't do anything at all. It doesn't even offer protection. But you can add all sorts of modules. There's literally dozens of options. And the combinations go into the tens of thousands easily. So what it also allows you to do as a mod pack maker is configure the recipes. So I've gone ahead and made the recipes really super hard because this armor is invincible once you've got it all the way powered up and all the different modules on it. And I've made the recipes cater to this interesting combination I've got of technology mods. So it uses a combination of items from thermal expansion, open computers, and immersive engineering, so that the recipes blend all of those things together. So it's really kind of a custom set just for this particular mod pack. I've also got a mod called Wearable Backpacks that gives you a backpack that shows up on the player. And if the player should get killed, then the backpack just falls to the ground. And you can come back and retrieve it later on. So that blends in, I think, very nicely with the Tomb Many Graves mod. So, another aspect of realism is I really hate it when your items disappear because of the vagaries of how Minecraft happened to be implemented. In the real world, if you were killed, well, you'd be dead and that would be it. But your stuff would still be there so that your heirs could come along and pick it up. What's next? Vending block, kind of a cool mod. So I was building this mod pack specifically for a server, and this adds a block where you can set it up, put some things in there and say, I'm willing to trade this for that. So I want a stack of wheat for 4 iron ingots. And it'll just sit there, and any player who comes along and drops in the 4 iron ingots can get a stack of wheat. And you can populate the inventory with a bunch of stuff, so you can make many different trades. It seemed like a neat way of doing things, because some folks on this server are on the west coast of the United States, some are on the east coast of the United States, and some are in Europe. So we don't always see each other when we log on, and that should make things a little bit easier. As far as decoration is concerned, I've got Agricraft, which adds hundreds, literally hundreds, of incredibly detailed models of all sorts of fun stuff to the game. Agricraft. Yeah, so here's like a wine rack, and here's a little toy R2-D2. Here's a stack of iron ingots, and all this stuff, glass tables, a bucket of milk, a pig plushie. I've got another mod spotlight on this one, so you can go check that one out to see the ridiculous amount of stuff. And this is all just Agricraft. It's a fantastic mod. But the way it works is you make yourself a little Agricraft table, drop in some clay and some red, green, and blue dye, and just make any of these items. So you don't have hundreds of new recipes, but instead they're kind of like clay sculptures, I guess, of the items. But yeah, they're very cool, and they definitely add a lot of character to any of your constructions. I also have a mod called Chisel, which allows you to basically adds a bunch of textures. So you can drop in chunks of wood, or cobblestone, or smooth stone, or end stone, or blocks of iron. I mean, you name it. And it will add anywhere from half a dozen to 24 different textures. Sandstone especially has all sorts of like Egyptian hieroglyphics and stuff like that. It's another one that has a good mod spotlight on my channel, so you can check out that to see how that one works. I've also added a mod that's new to me called Chisels and Bits. I talked a little bit about this before when I was back at the Turf Hut. But basically, it allows you to make 1/16th scale blocks and then to place them in the world and make basically what amounts to tiny little sculptures. Yeah, here's some awesome looking cliffs. Yeah, you can see I've already been here and did a little bit of mining. Yeah, Chisel and Bits. So I'm super looking forward to using that. That seems like a really, really fantastic mod, and it's going to add a tremendous amount of detail to the stuff that you can do. Finally, the last little bits to talk about. The GUI improvements. So let me take a look here. I've added inventory tweaks, one of my favorite mods for managing your inventory. So I've got a hotkey mapped where I can just sort all the items in my inventory. And if I were to look at a chest or something else like that, I could sort the chest, and gives you some extra hotkeys for moving things in and out of inventories. It drives me bonkers to use Minecraft without that. Journey map. So that's the teeny little map you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. I've also got a keyboard shortcut map so that I can bring up a full screen map and see everywhere I've been riding around. And I've been more or less giving you a tour of this whole continent as we've been talking here. Another fantastic mod also has a mod spotlight in my channel that you can check out. I'm also using a mod called Just Enough Items. This is, as you might guess, mimicking the not enough items or too many items or various other ones that have come before it. But the focus here is on being very, very lightweight, just a resource lookup, and very, very fast. So, for example, I can shift through hundreds and hundreds of pages, and it doesn't get bogged down, it doesn't have difficulties loading, it doesn't get stuck on things. Not Enough Items, for example, has a really hard time with this many things, and I knew this would be a really big mod pack, so I switched over to this one, which sadly doesn't provide you all the cool stuff that Not Enough Items does, but it's a lot faster at doing what it does do. So again, you can look up recipes and see how things work. There's a lot of different features that it has. It's actually a really, really nicely put together mod and very nicely focused on just providing these kind of lookup details. It's another one that has a mod spotlight on my channel, so you can check that out too. Let's see what else. I've got Wayla. What am I looking at? That's the tooltip thing that you can see in the top there. Another well put together mod, adds a lot of details. So if I was looking at crops, you can see how far along they are. There's just a ton of extra stuff that it can show you. And then finally, last but not least, I have Optifine installed. Particularly with having dynamic surroundings, adding a lot of effects, and having these really tall worlds from alternate terrain generation, it makes a lot of sense to try and boost my frame rate a little bit here, because things were starting to get a wee bit slow. And a few of the folks on my server don't have quite as powerful computers, so I think that should work out very well for everyone. So that's it. That's both a tour of the mod pack and a tour of this server environment that we're on. There's only a couple of us on the server, so we do have some more room. So if anyone listening who's a subscriber to the channel would like to join the server, go ahead and let a comment down below. I'm also going to include a link to the GitHub repository where the modpack's files are. So if you want to go over there and leave a comment so I can get in touch with you about joining the server, that would be great too. We like building things, and we don't like beating up on each other or knocking each other's stuff down. So if that's the kind of Minecraft experience you're looking for, then probably it won't work out. But if you also like building things and want to be on a cooperative, relatively peaceful, though not completely peaceful world, yeah, by all means, let me know. We'd love to get some more players. If you like this video, go ahead and hit like. If you want to know when the rest of the series is coming out, you can subscribe. And I will talk to you later.